More and more people will not need to think. There is someone there, a language model or whatever will come, that will think quicker, will compute more information that you don't even try to compute. Not thinking is a damn of a big risk for humankind, for society, for health. Biggest risk. How do you learn? By making mistakes. Be aware of those mistakes. Don't hide them. Own your own mistakes and make something out of them. That's the basic thing. The process of learning is through others, not despite others. You're not imposing yourself. You need to be humble. You need to understand that where you can help people is in working together, not that you're there to teach them. And we all fall into the trap that we want to be the number ones, especially when you are the number one. The last thing you have to do is to play like being the number one all the time.
I want to become a CEO. What can I expect? What would I be dealing with?
One of the key characteristics of a leader at a high position is.
So Manuel, what an honor is to have you here on the podcast Experts Path. Really appreciate you making the time to come.
Okay, it's my pleasure. I mean, we talk from time to time, and I was really happy when you invited me to share here some time with you talking about interesting things.
No, absolutely. And look, you're always someone I've always admire because of, what you're doing, your career, and also your humility and being open to share knowledge and to share perspectives. So I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Before we dive in, for those who don't know you, would you like giving us a intro, a brief overview about you, who Manuel Macedo is?
Oh, it's a bit embarrassing, not because you have a lot to say, but it's long. So I'll try to do the short
The what you can do,
version.
that's going to be fine.
So that I don't embarrass myself too much. So basically, I was born in Portugal. I'm Portuguese. So people sometimes, because of these funny accents, ask me, well, where do you come from? I lived in many countries, I think up to 10, speak a few different languages. Five, all of them badly, which gives me a kind of
Not true.
mix which it's not easy for people to spot where I am from. Or for some easier than to others, as always, but they're not always spot on. So I'm Portuguese, born in Portugal, lived in many different countries, be it with my parents. My father was a diplomat, and because of his career, together with my mother and my brother and him, of course, the family, we were able to be in a few countries. That kind of gave me good sense of, wow, it's great to live in different places. You never get bored. I have this obsession with not getting bored. So when I grew up, and then I studied at university management, and my career very earlier from the beginning, I would say, I felt, well, what am I doing now in Portugal? Because I was in Portugal at the time after finishing my university degree in management, and I think 2 years later, after finishing it, I was already taking off to Spain, and that was the first country of many others that I added to the ones I'd been with my parents. I'm married. I have, with Christina, I have two kids, Antonio and Francisco. And currently I'm living in Barcelona, in Spain. And my family is spread out like mine was. My kids, they're not kids anymore, 22 and 18, two adults. They live in the UK.
All right, all right. So you mentioned 10 different countries. What were those countries? Well, Spain,
Yeah, sometimes
Portugal.
now I learned it because sometimes when I'm telling them, you repeat one of the same twice.
But
So
too
without
many.
it. So it starts with Portugal. Let's do Europe first. So
Yeah.
Portugal by order. Portugal, order of geography. Portugal, Spain, Italy, the
Italy.
UK, Germany, United Russia. I mean, at the time it was the Soviet Union, but now it is Russia.
Oh,
Then,
okay.
if you go to the other continent, south to Africa, I lived in Angola. And then, if you move and you cross the Atlantic, I lived starting at the bottom. I live in Chile. I lived in Brazil, and I lived in Mexico. So I think that makes up the 10, right?
Well,
Do the
that's
maths. Weren't
a
you
few
counting?
a few countries. That's where you can explain the five languages. All right, but
Yes,
that
exactly.
you know what's interesting about you, Manuel, is you know, I talk to many different people and executives, but you have something that uh, you first of all these different countries, but then as well you're pretty, you seem to be very curious about different industries and what's going on in different places and acquiring, you know, experiences uh, in different places, really industries, as I mentioned, and you may have a very interesting perspectives on how things work, or at least connect different things that you saw across the board. And one of those things that I'm very interested in hearing from you is it's leadership, which is a very broad topic, right? But I can imagine you worked at big multinationals, associations that you've been part of, smaller companies, advisors. Uh, but if you had to define what is leadership, you know, or what is the role of a leader in your perspective, what would that be?
That's a very, very open question. I mean, leadership is something that now is in every textbook. It's on your daily life because now there is the accepted belief that somehow you're leading others, right? Uh, Not long ago, people were talking more about management and managing. And there is a clear distinction between one and the other. And in simple terms, one is much more on the technical side. You're managing a situation, you're managing more than one situation, but something objective. When you lead, you are taking an ecosystem, a group of people together with the assets that they are management from one place to a better place. Not just moving things around, but moving things up. That's what leadership at the end is about. And because the definition is so open, it's very difficult to say there is only one way of exercising it correctly. There are some traits that you need to have, and others that you would rather not have or control them, which will help you a lot if you really want to become a learning leader, right? And pay attention. I didn't say good leader. There's no good or bad leader. There are times where you exert it in a better way, in more successful, and everybody is
Mhm.
happy with that. There are times where, you know, it's very difficult to be as successful and as effective. Yet, you need to have certain traits that make the difference between at least attempting to be a leader and not just a manager.
And what you're saying, it's true because there's no good or bad leaders. I think it also depends on the context a lot and what you're trying to achieve at the same time. And you mentioned a couple of times traits, you know,
Mhm.
so what are those traits that leaders should strive to have? And then what are the ones that they should not have, as you said?
Yeah, right. I mean, and I was thinking about the way you formulated it, and in the discussion, there are no good or bad leaders. There are good and bad leaders, the same way that there are good or bad leadership.
Hmm.
But it has to do more how you articulate it, and it's not an upfront definition and a static one. That's an important thing. It's not like, oh, he's such a great leader, and that is something that stays, you know, with him or with her all his life and at every moment. There are ups and downs, and that was saying you can be a good leader. Sometimes things can go wrong, but in order to at least attempt having those good moments, experiences as leader, you need some important traits. Humility is one of them. Two, understanding. If you're not, you know, humble, if you really think you're the best, and this is about your self-projection, you end up not winning the others' hearts. There's no leader, no effective leadership that is only rational.
Hmm.
We are not computers. We have emotions. Our brain is split in more than one area, and definitely emotions play a role. So you'd rather count on them. use them, be aware of them, try to understand them as a leader. So you need to be humble in order to accommodate what is beyond rational. And what I like to use as an example is like when you're managing something, it's very much about being rightful or wrong. It's about yes, I do it this way, or I do it the other way. I can be more positive in my view towards it because I have experience. I can be more ballistic. I can be more deterministic. And when you're managing a situation, all that is okay. However, when you're leading through it, you are more on an integrative mode. You integrate not only those elements from the management side, but you have to integrate the emotional part of who or with whom you are integrated in an ecosystem where you want leadership to be successful and effective. So it's a conscious exercise, leadership. It's an exercise of understanding permanently what is going on, right? Rather than understanding that something is upfront right or wrong, and now I'm going to push it through because
Hmm.
I'm quicker, I'm more an expert, and I know what it is, the outcome. That is managing a situation. It's short-sighted. If you want to really get it, you need to have a wider, broader approach, as I said.
So you're talking about humility, and it seems to me that it's a lot about, yeah, managing the situations. That's one thing. Then it's about winning hearts and understanding people. And so, how does one learn how to be an effective leader? Where should I focus my efforts? Is
Two
it in
things.
an okay?
Make mistakes. How do you learn? By making mistakes. Two, even more important, be aware of those mistakes
Mm.
and don't hide them, right? Don't just say, no, 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 this was not me. Own your own mistakes. Is it publicly, privately? Own them and make something out of them. That's the basic thing. So nobody's going to be perfect or be a great leader just because read 10 leadership or self-improvement books. Right, you are good at leadership because you attempt, because you understand what is going on with you and with the others on a permanent way, because you do not adopt the victim mode that it's all about the others making mistakes and poor you, but rather a learner of the others, learner of yourself, how you react to the inputs that others give you, even or especially when you don't like them, and how you can turn all of this into the direction that you want, that you understand, that you have the goal of obtaining.
And do you think that because you have that people part and then you have the technical
Yeah.
experts, people who are very good technically in their domain expertise, do you think that is a requisite for you to be an effective leader, or that is not really necessary? I mean, if you're going to lead a sales team or programming team, but you've never done that, can you still be an effective leader?
Obviously, I mean, there are limits to everything. You cannot try to launch a rocket and you know nothing about physics,
Yeah.
right? Because being a leader is also being credible to the others. If you have no clue of you talking about, even if you have a lot of leadership technique, because there is technique as well, obviously that will not make it. Having said that, there is one important distinction, in my opinion. Technique you can learn. Maybe you don't learn it immediately, right?
Yeah.
You use into artificial intelligence, and now you get more things immediately, but you don't understand all the technical aspects of an issue immediately. So it's not from night to day, but you can learn. Leadership, you also can learn, but you don't learn the same way. It's not a sequential learning. It's a mistake, a trial and error. It's something that you need to be upfront, open to it, and to endure during this journey of putting leadership as an objective itself, because otherwise you'll always uh, end up in the easier side, which is the management, right? Where the technical prerequisites are the differentiator.
So you see a lot of programs and educational programs, etc. And probably that's more focused on the management side of things rather than leadership. Because as you said, leadership is something that you need to make mistakes and be aware of those mistakes, which is a great way to put it. Because making mistakes alone, that it you can you know keep being a
You
mess
don't
and never
care, you
learn
don't
with
see
it.
them, or you
Yeah,
blame the others.
yeah.
Yes.
I think it was. I'm not exactly sure of what was the year, but you were appointed as the president for Honeywell, Latin America. When was that exactly? What year?
In 2019, it was before COVID, I think, one
So
semester. It was halfway through 19, yes.
halfway through 19. So at the moment you were appointed and you were responsible for all Honeywell's divisions across the entire region, right?
Right, at the time, yeah. Hmm.
And how many people were there at the time?
It was around, I think it was 14,000 plus, yes.
Well,
All
okay.
the countries, Latin America, yeah, big business.
So that's a big business, and that's a very complex business with multiple divisions and also with multiple countries, all with different legislations and regulation as we have it in Latin America. How is it to manage a such a complex business? Because you don't get that complex, right? So how was it for you? When you joined, you obviously had a career and had experience. Of course, you don't get there from night to day.
Right?
But how was it for
Well,
you when you got there?
in one word, extremely complex. Now, so it's not like, oh, piece of cake. It was damn complex and difficult. I had huge amount of experience already. I mean, this was only a few years ago, back in 19. I've had more than 20 years before that of top management, general manager, CEO experience, multicultural experience. So I had been exposed to it. However, to when you change job, it's an experience on itself because of the culture. You need to learn the company culture. You need to know how things are done in that company because that's how it works. If that company, like Honeywell, is not one company, but several companies because it's a conglomerate, even more difficult. In the way that we defined leadership, we said leadership is at the top of many things, which includes also management skills, technical know how. So it was very complex to understand all the different divisions from aerospace, automation, oil and gas, building technologies, safety and protection. So there are many, many, many areas. So at the end, and I think this is the point, the way you tackle it is first, you need to accept that you don't know everything, you know very little, and you don't fake it, right? That you have to turn that into a strength. Okay.
Mm.
You arrived there because of something. It was definitely not a mistake after, 10 interviews and I don't know how many tests. So you don't fake it. You know there's a steep learning curve, and like everyone, you are there to learn. Second one is that the process of learning is through others, not despite others. You're not imposing yourself. You need to be humble. You need to understand that where you can help people is in working together because you also have a lot of experience and you can learn quickly. But it's not that you're there to teach them. So if you put those two together and then with your leadership team, you define a clear change agenda in what you think needs to be changed. Then you're adding up not only your experience, but the experience of everyone. And then you start working as a team, and your weaknesses, because you don't know the business when you go to a new company, are clearly mitigated by the strength of the
Mm.
group. So, despite it was so complex, you can break the complexity to smaller parts through creating the coalitions with your leadership team, the engagement with the team, and helping defining a clear vision where you want to go as a team. That's more or less what we try to do, and to a great extent, in many aspects, we are successful.
And when you have such a complex business with so many different business units and so many people and parts of the business demanding for your attention, so how do you, or how did you manage your, I'm not saying your time, but how do you focus? How do you stay focused on what's important when you have all these different demands and all these different businesses and all the, how do you stay focused when you have so many demands in at that level, you know?
Yes. You just don't allow yourself to be eaten up by those demands. So be it at Honeywell, be it at Henkel, be it at Metro Group, and the big, very big corporations I've worked for, or even in the smaller ones I've worked for. One thing that you need to try to avoid as a leader is to become the dustbin leader. The
What's
dustbin
that?
leader, the dustbin, as it's an expression in English, is like where you put all the rubbish. Uh,
Okay.
and so if you start collecting the other's problems, right? So someone comes with a problem to your desk and you pose it here, put it here, blah, blah, you become the dustbin because everything goes into the rubbish bag. Call it rubbish
Mm.
bag instead of dustbin if that's better for you, and you just accumulate problems. So the way you lead is not by saying that you have the last word on everything, is by helping people understanding what we're talking about, helping cutting corners many times, and delivering it back to the person that brought it at the right level to lead the solution of the problem. That's how you don't become somehow part of the problem, because you just accumulate too many problems to solve that you cannot do because you cannot know everything, and you don't even if you knew, you don't have the time. So again, this gives a serious hint to how you work in teams, how you work with people, how you understand your notions about empowerment, and how you feel comfortable with not having to decide everything, which is very important. Another sign of humility.
And that's the thing, because you have this, I think there's this false perspective that leaders, they need to know everything, they need to have all the answers. And as you said, that's not true. It's just impossible, especially at that at that level, right? So when someone comes to you with these problems, because probably that's what people is going to probably do. Hey, you're the leader. Hey, we have this problem. Here it is. What do we do? How do you teach them, or how do you train them, or how you change that so that doesn't keep happening, right? So you're my leader, Manuel. Look, there's something going on in the aerospace division. This is the
Asking
problem.
questions, asking questions,
Mhm.
not giving answers. First, because you don't have the answer. Second, because answering is part of it, but asking questions is the way forward that puts and creates the real communication between two or more individuals, is by interchanging information, adding value to it. So part of a problem is not the problem itself, but the way it is formulated, right? So usually you should help people in formulating the problem or reformulating the problem in the right way. That is not you, it's them reformulating the problems, but through your questions, right? So at the end of the day, helping to solve a problem is not solving it yourself, but asking the right questions that will give the individual with the right knowledge the capability to get unstuck from where he is. Okay, so that he moves on and understands maybe what he was not seeing before, right? Creating obviously the environment where people are free to approach you and do not feel like they have to be Superman without doubt is important. You need to create an environment of humility in the way that people know that they can approach with what is many times understood as weakness, and it's not weakness, it's doubt, which is part of being a human being.
Hmm.
The trick is don't fall into the trap that you need to know more than them and that you just create value if you have the last word or the solution. Don't let your ego or your mediocrity, because everybody has good and bad moments, let's put it this way, and we all fall into the trap that we want to be the best. It's in our DNA. We are warriors. So we need to
Yeah.
control many times that part of our nature that somehow wants us to be the alphas, the number ones, and understand that, especially when you are the number one, that the last thing you have to do is to play like being the number one all the time,
And why you say that?
because you'll be much more the number one in terms of leading if you give space to the others.
Right. Right. So what you're talking about a lot is it not being that how what was the expression, the dustbin, that's
Dustbin,
that's
dustbin, dust
dustbin,
from yeah.
uh, dustbin leader.
Bin, it's like a bucket,
That in the
and the
back,
dust,
yeah.
the rubbish. Yeah,
Yeah. So that way, you're also, when you do that, which I'm thinking right now, you're not only just not becoming the dustbin leader, but you're also creating leaders by taking that approach.
obviously, because one of the important things is that you feel, and this is very philosophical, but at the moment, you give the best of yourself when you feel in balance, right? You feel in balance when you don't feel threatened. It's different from pressure when you want to succeed, when you want to give the best. That's one thing. But when you feel threatened, you go into protective mode. You have all your energy focused in protecting yourself. You don't have the energy utilized, used to leverage your thinking, to be creative. So, and this is science. This is not me saying. This is obviously already written, and there's a lot of information on that. So, as a leader, it's your role to create those spaces. That is different from not pointing out where there are flaws in the attitude generally, or specifically when people do things wrong and you need to call their attention. You should do it. You should not just be a nice guy. But that is different from always acting on the, let's say, uh, 0 1 dichotomy of wrong or right. You need really to understand what is the issue, how people are approaching it, and not necessarily if the result is there means that they're doing it right, and if the result is not there is because they are useless. Make them feel comfortable with their shortcomings, and you'll see how they will overcome it quicker.
Hmm.
Comfortable with sharing the overcomes, not comfortable, correction, in having shortcomings. No, comfortable in
Okay.
knowing they can have them, and that's not the end of the line.
Right, right. Because as you said, you got to make mistakes, at all different level. You got to make mistakes, be aware of those, learn from those mistakes, and
You,
move
you
on
you made a lot of mistakes, and I hope for you, you're still making quite a few. I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm still making mistakes. It's important
every
sometimes
day.
that the mistakes are not so big that they are life threatening. Sometimes they can be. So it's not also something that you just go in life just doing mistakes left and right. You try to minimize them to avoid them, but don't panic just because you make a mistake, and don't try to hide it.
That's an interesting point because you have. I was having a chat the other day with actually a podcast that's going to be published next week, and this person was saying, you this is the president of Mercer, Brazil,
Okay.
and he was talking about you have different, how you make decisions when they're complex, and how do you know you're making the right decisions, right? So you have decisions that are reversible, that you can go back and fix that and move on. But there are some decisions that are going to have a huge impact on the business, on people that you're leading, and people who are leading you at the same time, right?
Mhm.
So when you're talking about those, when things can go really wrong, when things are not reversible, how is your approach different to letting mistakes be made, right?
I mean, I was not telling or not saying that you should, when you see something is definitely going against the wall, that you should let it go for people to learn, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't defend, oh, let people make mistakes to learn. What I'm saying is mistakes are inevitable. When they happen, you should not hide them and should try to learn from them, which is very different from saying incentivize them to happen. So
Doing.
two
Yeah.
different things.
Right.
If you can allow a mistake or if you can prevent a mistake to take place, you should do it, right? I mean, in general
Interesting.
terms, is a minor mistake sometimes with kids. Now you say, okay, let him hit the hand gently there so that he will understand that, you don't run against the wall.
Yeah.
So taking this to the extreme and to the management and leadership side, sometimes that is also valid. But we're talking here about preventing bad things. When you talk about bad things, you should not allow them to happen, and you should prevent them. But preventing them through people, and through asking and making people also realize what could be the consequences before the dramatic happening takes place.
All right. So let's put it in a bit of a practical way. At the
Yeah.
time, uh, what could have been an irreversible mistake, so people understand, at that level, what sort of, what they can find at that level when they're a president of a big multinational, for a very complex region, what sorts of mistakes we're talking about, or situations that are complex and irreversible. Maybe one that you
I mean, the only thing
faced
that is
in the past.
the only thing that is really irreversible is death, right? Up to now, you die. All the other things somehow you can transform them. They can be
Yeah.
much more punitive, and the punishment may be very big if you make a mistake, and that's why you should avoid it. But you should not become, don't take yourself too seriously. I mean, I take myself overly serious. I say this, but I have a huge difficulty in applying it. But you should not, laughing about yourself and about your shortcomings is part of a happy life. Very difficult to do because you have your own set of expectations, ego, and you live in a society. It is very demanding on those aspects unless you go and decide to live somewhere where you don't
Forest.
have it
Yeah.
in the forest and you look at the trees and
Yeah.
like I had a friend one day
Not
that
bad.
said, "Oh, when I see those dogs in the street, I want to be one like them, free and barking around." So I always remember him saying that. Of course, he didn't. He
Because,
just wanted to be
well,
like that
maybe.
when he go into a presentation. He didn't want, but he loved to be sitting in restaurants and not being there hungry like that, like a dog.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, going back to your point. Um, at the end of the day, things can be, to a certain extent, prevented. When you cannot change the outcome, you can act on it. And big mistakes are generally, for me, the ones that have a over proportional impact on the outcomes of unrelated things in the future. When you, for instance, make a mistake that endangers in a team trust, that's a big mistake,
Hmm.
right? If there are certain values that in leadership are very important and are the basis of everything, and they are built and developed on it. Trust, growing trust. If people lose trust, it's very difficult to exercise teamwork without trust, right? It's like the element of trust in company's culture. People need to feel psychological safety, which has
Hmm.
to do also with trust, that whatever they do or the way they do and behave as makes them feel well as a human being is accepted and they're not at risk. So when generally the big mistakes are the ones that create an element or an impact on the status quo that prevents in the future from trust to be present at the required level for beauty to unleash.
Talking a little bit about the, what is like being a CEO, and this is thinking more from the perspective of, hey, I already started my career. Went to college already, and I'm building my career, and I had a few positions, and my a senior manager today. But my goal is I want to become a CEO at that level. And the question is, what can what can I expect at that level? How is my day gonna look like? What I'm gonna be dealing with on a daily basis, weekly basis, and let's start with that. You know, so what can I expect at that level, and what would I be dealing with?
Well, many people have this approach, which was not mine, to the career, which is a corporate ladder. Pa, 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 and the only way is go up and above.
Right.
I really honestly never cared about it. Maybe because I was having it and I kind of depreciated what, or did not really give enough importance to success as maybe I should have. But I never put, the wanting to go up in the corporate ladder as an objective and being a CEO as clearly a goal, right? So the first take is you don't need to have it as a goal to reach it, which
Okay.
somehow tells you how little you are in comparison to how what happens to your life, right? Because if that was a clear ingredient that you were, so decisive in what happens to you, like one many
Mhm.
times tend to think we are, then in my case, I would have never become because I really never said I want to be the CEO. Uh, I wanted similar, probably, things that go alike with the definition of a CEO, and because I then became and I went up in the ranks and I had broader responsibility. So yes, there are certain convergences, but you don't need to have this more, ballistic approach that by age of whatever I want to be a
No.
CEO.
Right.
However, once you get there, and there are different levels of CEO. I don't like the expression CEO because, I mean, finally, define me CEO. If you're going to say that CEO is the guy that has all the pressure and decides everything, no, everybody has stakeholders. Everybody has, even a CEO has the market ultimately, if you want, or the
Absolutely.
non-executive board to tell a story and to show what he's going, and a lot of people to persuade and convince. And definitely, he is alone many times.
Mm.
Loneliness is one of the key characteristics of a leader at a high position, be it the CEO of a 100 billion or 1 trillion company, be it the CEO of a 1 million company. At the end, it is as hard, as difficult for the human being to be a CEO of a 100 million or 10 million company as it is of a 1 trillion. The complexity in the other is much bigger, but
Right.
your energy and what it requires from you, what you need to do in your available time in the day will be very much the same. But just with much more complexity and also with many more people to help you. So loneliness is one of the characteristics. So you need to find ways of mitigating it. Loneliness expresses itself as well as, in many cases, you have these blind spots, and you need to be aware that you won't be able to see them. That's why they call blind spots, and you need to find people that help you in putting light onto it. So that's another characteristic of a CEO is search for information and avoid as much as possible two things:
Uh-huh.
symmetry of information, right? Which means people trying to influence you because they know you're the CEO and they have more information than you, and they use asymmetry of information in a way that can manipulate you. As a CEO, you're much more vulnerable to that because people know what your position is and they try, of course, many times to take advantage. Not that they are bad, but the rules of the game. And the second one is the moral risk in everything that you do or is done to you. What is the moral risk? Moral risk. It's the change in behavior that happens after a certain or given element or fact is known. The typical utilization of this is in insurance. If you don't have your car insured, you drive in a certain way. Once you got an insurance to your car, you drive in a slightly different way with a higher marginal propensity
Depending on
to
the
have.
level of insurance as well. Yeah.
But then of course, it depends on many things, but the moral risk has to do with that concept. So, how you manage the symmetry of information, how people change their behavior, the way or the information they give to you, when they relate to you, and that you are aware of it, it's a very important element that as a leader at whatever level in the organization, even more at the top, you need to consider.
And you mentioned the this lonely. It's lonely. Being a leader is lonely. That's a common characteristic. And you said that you need to find ways to mitigate that. How can leaders mitigate that loneliness? Is it through, I mean, what options do they have?
Having more than one life, okay?
Mm,
So you cannot have only your corporate life where you have similar to you reasonings and people and where you're limited in different perspectives. You may have a very good board, brilliant people, but they will all somehow bond to you in a similar way within a certain culture that is the company's culture, and that will not help you beyond what it already helps you.
yeah.
You already have a family, but you cannot take all your issues to the family because you know that will have an impact on them. And you also don't feel comfortable in involving them in things that you know, no matter how you take drama out of it, they will feel the drama on that you're going through, and you don't want them. So having more than one life in a way that you need to have other activities that not only take pressure out of you by making you look at things differently. Many times, finding a group of people, other, they don't have to be friends. I mean, there are concepts of creating sounding boards with people that create these sounding boards, and you trust them, and you're there with them for many years, and they give a view on your problems. They're not related to your business. The only thing they want is to give you good feedback so that you give them good feedback as well. So you try to find things off the beaten track of your professional and family life so that you can see that those blind spots in a clear way, otherwise you don't see them.
Right. And so that's good, having more than a corporate life. Then it keeps you safe, keeps you mentally healthy, let's say as well, right?
Stable.
Yeah,
Stable.
stable. What about organizations like I mean, you are part of Vistage today. What
Yeah.
about those sorts of organizations? Do they
I mean,
help with this,
currently,
or it's in somehow, or that's not really for
I
that
mean,
sort of thing?
the concept itself that I described before is very common also, and Vistage actually
Yeah.
does an excellent job at that in creating those peer advisory groups where
Right.
exactly different CEOs are able to share information within a certain configuration, which is a boardroom. So they
Yeah.
meet on a regular basis, and then they share different using a given methodology called issue processing. So at the end, that simulates a bit what I'm saying, which is you expose yourself to a different environment where you can get very useful advice, or at least live the experiences of others without having to go through them. If you are always on your beaten track, you will
Yeah.
always get more, and if you get more, you cannot of the same. You cannot expect anything different.
All right. You come from that space, all your life, corporate life at least, the Henkel and big multinationals and part of the AmCham and these different associations. But not too long ago, you made a bit of a change, and you went to a very interesting company, which is Kingfolks. and you
Yes.
made that transition totally different from, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but totally different from the industrial automation space and aerospace and building technologies, etc. How are things different now, and why the transition?
Right. I mean, the modern one, there is more than one question there. Um, it's not so different the way that it was, and it is a technology company, where technology has a big role in what Keenfolks does. It's an integrative AI digital transformation company that is in the forefront of marketing automation using language models and agents to create automation in market and much more efficiency and productivity for fast moving, not only, but pharmaceutical, fast moving consumer groups,
Right.
goods company. So from that perspective, it was not a big change. The big change was that it was a much smaller company without all the thousand resources, and where you need really, and I always like that, to not only set the direction, but you are involved many times in creating it from scratch. That is something that at a certain level in companies I missed. I missed being able to help without disturbing, right? Because there were people that could execute things much better than me, and why should I go
Right.
there and interfere? I don't micromanage. Here, when I did that in Kinfolks, it was not micromanagement, it was a need. You need to set a direction together with the team, and then you need to, roll your
We're all,
sleeve,
yeah, total different environment. Yeah.
just do it, right? And it's funny and interesting that I my background is management. Then I did a master in industrial in management as well, strategic management for industries, and I worked first in banking, then in marketing, a bit in finance, where I was lecturing at university. But I became a generalist, a general manager. I think at the age of 32, I had my first assignment as general manager of a
Right.
multinational in Portugal. I was, I think, 31 or 32, freaked out. I was not a manager. I was only a manager. No idea about leadership. Only had black and white, 0 and 1, very
Right.
dichotomic. Either you're right or you're wrong. So terrible, terrible. I made a long way of many mistakes since then and evolved, I think, to something pretty much different than what I am today. And that gave me, I think, that learning, that journey of evolving from something very, rightfully
Mm.
reasonable, but limited in the impact it has, the true impact it has on others, to someone that had much more impact on others, much beyond what he was doing. This opportunity gave me like halfway to a bit become the good side of that I loved when I was much younger and technically to do things at the
Mhm.
same time that I could still be at a very high level trying to set and help the teams and myself setting the direction. So we implemented a lot of things that required that, and that's why it was different, but it was very fulfilling.
That's well, that's great. Now you're having the whole thing, the corporate, the big company, the complexity, and now rolling up sleeves and technology and being there and making decisions and executing the whole the whole cycle completed.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And all with people. Now, at the end of the day, the common element, the common denominator, and once you get used to work through people, and not
Mm,
despite of them, not against them,
mm.
and to see that they are good and very good and less good and very bad. Yes, very bad people everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Uh, and it's normal distribution, and you have most of them in different way, and then you have brilliant and very bad in many respects, in
Right.
intellectually, cognitively, values, behaviors. It's diversity is fully there. So in a small company, everything is much more meaningful. And that was an experience, but I didn't do only that. I decided at a certain moment that I want to make it even broader. So there are a few areas that I like very much. Sustainability is one of them. So I've been
Mhm.
working also as an advisor in this area here, helping startups, even smaller companies in the area of pricing. I love the mathematical part behind
Yeah,
pricing,
same.
and it is everywhere. So how do you price things like integrity of AI? Now it's well, where is the value there? Where do you create value? Where is value pricing? So that's another area that I love. And the third one, which you put Vistage, but you put also Axelian with whom
Mm.
I work, and it's transversal to everything I do. Is the leadership side, it's the conscious business element, it's the high performing teams, is how you really, as a human being and as a leader, you really fulfill what you want in life and how you deal with life. So that's a third area that I really thrive and like when I,
Mhm.
with customers, with clients, and out of my experience throughout my management career, I also help them getting to the very best.
Right. You're talking. We're talking about and you mentioned something that Keenfolks does in a very particular area, but this is happening across the board, which is not news right now, but it's the artificial intelligence and
Mhm.
automation and all this world. Having in mind that technical skills are now probably done better with this technology than probably any other human can. I'll give you an example. I have no idea of how to code, right? Programming, zero idea. However, using a tool, I was able to build a website. I mean, a landing page in probably an hour or so
Yeah.
without knowing anything at all. So having that in mind, what are the the skills that you think will become more valuable as AI increases in effectiveness, in the ability to do these things that probably people did, you know?
It's very, very clear for me that all the skills related to thinking capability are will be more and more valued because more and more people will not need to think. It's a paradox, right? There is someone there out there, a language model or whatever will come that will think quicker, will compute more information that you don't even try to compute. I mean, um, so what is the risk? There are many risks, right? And
Yeah.
everybody talks about many risks. Oh, we don't have jobs. Not talking about the threats. I'm talking a much bigger risk is that people don't feel the need to think. We already see a lot of that in companies and in the world where you don't really feel compelled to think anymore. You just do it, you follow it, and okay, fair. But that take it to an extreme where you really lose the capability to do basic thinking, resuming an essay to 10 lines after you wrote 2 pages. You just put it in ChatGPT, it does it for you. You lose the ability of thinking how you do it. And in a couple of years, you cannot do it anymore, if not earlier. So for me, the biggest risk is that we will not be thinking as much as we want because we just don't need to think. And not thinking is a damn of a big risk for humankind, for society, I think for health itself.
Yeah. So putting this example, for example, right? When people used to do calculations by hand, you gotta go and write and do the calculation, but then the calculator came and and people lost that skill of doing calculations on their, thinking for yourself and the process and that thing. And now we're talking about a similar thing, right? Because you have a text,
Much.
for example, different. So just want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. It's so. Do you see as a bad thing losing those skills because of AI? I mean, you're talking about this summarizing a text, right?
I
Um,
think it's very bad to lose whatever skills you have. And if we're talking about losing, yes, it's bad because of AI or whatever it is.
yeah,
If you become less able in general terms, it's not a good thing. If AI makes you lazier than you already are as a human being, an intelligent person that already decides where to put effort, and if you have less need to put effort on something because someone will do it for you,
yeah,
the end result is that you end up being affected by it in the mid long term, in also not knowing how to do anything. And the thing that I'm talking here is
yeah.
the most important one, which is the differentiator which of humankind, which is the thinking
Thinking.
ability, the rational thinking ability,
All
not
right.
the
Okay.
thinking, the rational ability to look at things, difficult concepts, and break or go through them and articulate them. That requires training, that requires exercise. If your mind is lazy, it's not because you have that, you lose that capacity sooner or later. That's for me the biggest risk, not of AI itself, but it's, I would rephrase it, it's the risk latent to human beings, laziness of as technology evolves and many things that we do can be replaced by technology, example, language models, delivering a lot of thinking, that we lose that
Right.
capability. We need it, it's not there anymore.
I
Okay?
see. I see what you're saying now. All right. So it's the thinking, the rational thinking, thinking through things, and critical thinking, and because of course it's easy.
Rational,
Hey,
it's not cognitive only, it's articulating the complexities and not someone doing it on your behalf. That's what AI does.
because that's right, because it's so easy today. You go to to a chat GPT, to a Gemini, whatever. You say, hey, look, act as if you were an expert CEO of a large multinational, right? And this is the situation, and this is the thing. So what would you do? What do you recommend? And kind of you're outsourcing your thinking. And when you do that, that's when you lose the ability. You rely more on that tool to do the thinking that you should be doing than yourself, right? So you're trusting more that than yourself, and that's how
And
you lose it.
but that on itself is not the big problem. Big problem is that you lose even the critical reasoning ability of evaluating what you're given as an outcome and as an output.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's a that's I had lots of different conversations, and about this topic, but we never got to the risk of that happening. So,
I, I don't fear artificial intelligence. I don't
huh,
put it on. On the opposite, I think it will come, will develop, and it will never stop. I think the effort should not be on the limitation of artificial intelligence, but on the policing of humankind and human beings and what we should keep on doing and not allow that we stop doing it. And it's not on stopping technology. Let it go, let it flow.
no,
Understand that it will replace a lot of activities we do, but let's not put ourselves into the place that we don't want to be without critical reasoning abilities because we just stopped using them. And there is one thing that is even more intimidating, which is as it is now, and you can argue whether that will come soon or not, that artificial intelligence does not have its conscience. Right. So there's no conscience because it is formulating, it is learning from prior information, it is computing a lot of information quickly, damn quickly, but it is not conscious. It will come one day that maybe artificial intelligence become conscious, as we may be becoming conscient of that. That for me is a big problem.
do you have any recommendation, especially for executives, when we're talking about senior executives, on how they should, on the skills that they should develop having this new technology growing more and more and more every time, where should they focus their trainings, their learnings, the skills that they should develop from now on?
That's again a very good but very broad question. I think if I want to give here a thread of a thought with certain consistency, it is inability to evaluate critically the outcomes that will come with technology. What I cannot evaluate, where I have no idea, I become, when I'm ignorant towards a certain outcome, I cannot judge it good or bad. I just accept and I become very vulnerable. So, education as leaders should be on people still being able to critically analyze what they are being given by technology. Otherwise, and I felt it myself. There's a moment in the utilization of artificial intelligence and language models where you don't question yourself anymore, right? It's like you're overwhelmed by the speed it produces all that
Yeah.
information, gives though that data point, that you stop questioning. You don't question anything. I did this exercise, a couple of years ago when ChatGPT came out the first time. I don't know how exactly when it was. It was already a long time ago, but not that long that I cannot remember. And
2 or 3 years.
I was, what is this about ChatGPT? So one of the things I wanted to test is whether he was giving me right or wrongful information. And I put a very easy simultaneous equation that I knew still at my advanced age how to solve. Uh, and he solved it badly. Right, there was a mistake, and I
Uh-huh.
wrote and I said there was a mistake. Oh, thank you, blah 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 blah. Corrected the mistake, and
Yeah.
then I asked again the question. The second time, he already used the information.
What you
But
gave.
hence the ability to be able, to a certain level, to critically evaluate what you're given. This is valid throughout mankind evolution. So if we lose that, somehow we are more vulnerable to whatever.
Yeah.
And so leaders in organizations and when people use and they need to, you cannot restrict it because you'll not be competitive, but you have to find ways that people have a critical, that they're not couriers just of the information, but that they understand it, what is in there, and somehow they can evaluate whether that needs drilling or not, that needs criticism or not, and people should not avoid that, avoid
Mhm.
doing that. So as a leader, you try to instill in people this critical thinking part and never lose it.
Yeah. When I'm not sure how you've done it, and I know you've done several programs and things, and in terms of education or how you learn things and how you go about trainings, you have of course different sources. But in your experience, what has worked better for you when you look to learn new things, new skills? Is it formal programs? Is it books? Is it conversations with experts? What has worked better for you
All
in
of it.
general?
All of it. You learn through being exposed to different sources of knowledge in different formats, and you learn through exercising it and
Mhm.
executing on it. You don't learn sitting down and listening only. It's minor. You get awareness. And
Yeah.
then you learn through applying, executing on it. So I think any learning needs to have the two components. Not necessarily they happen at the same time, but the process is only completed if you then execute on the learnings. And that is a good, let's say, conversation as well to a topic that now crossed my mind, which has to do with corporate world, academia, right? For me,
Right.
it has been always intriguing, the differences. between one and the other. So I remember during many times in my corporate life going to these beautiful Harvards and INSEADs and IESES and the Thunderbirds. And I've been to all of them, and about 3 days immersive learning where you are there with the best experts. And then always intrigued me when you come back to the corporate world. Some sometimes you need to write a report and be critical what you've learned and how can you apply this, but that would last 1 week. But most of the times that is put not forgotten, put as far away as possible because we just don't do things like here. We don't do things that way, right? So there is a clear split and division. What I've noticed in the corporate world, in a way that is intriguing, and of course I don't want to overgeneralize. I'm sure that in R&D departments, probably as you get more technical, this is
Hmm.
not quite. But when you go to management, where I have been, and I've been quite across the board in many different industries, companies, people are generally not articulating the best way of doing things from what they learn, but rather doing things as the culture of the company allows them to survive and to expect them to behave. And that's a huge limitation on itself that many times the corporate world does not tackle at all, because that's a gray area where you unleash then a lot of things that you don't know if you can control on people. And so, but you don't really take the advantage of everything that academia has and that you've been learning. Many times we criticize the theoreticals, yes, and many times they are, but that is not my point. My point is, okay, not on the flaws of the academia and how maybe they are too far away from reality. It is on the other side of the corporate world, how it really uses all the knowledge it sends, thousands of people to a lot of trainings and then doesn't want them or don't want them to use it at all or to change the way of doing things. And nobody
So why?
questions. And that is intriguing to me.
So why are they still sending their executives to these programs then? You know.
Well, relate this to the prior conversation of IA. You lose the critical reasoning while you're doing things. You stop questioning yourself. Then you just do that. And that's
It's
it.
already happening. Is
I mean, you don't need that. I mean, it's not artificial intelligence. It's always the clue is always on us, right? As human beings, and all these stories about three or four monkeys in a room, and that one of them is bitten almost to death because he got a banana, and then next time comes a new one and goes to hold the banana. The others beat him to death because they don't want to be beaten to death, so they are red. And finally, nobody is there from, and they replace the monkeys, and finally there is no monkey there anymore from the ones that saw the beating up, but they all keep on beating up because somehow they're just repeating,
it
mimicking what
just
the
keeps
other
keep,
did.
and it
So
just
at
keeps
the end of
happening.
the day, that's how human beings, be it in big corporations, be it in small corporations, many times behave. So we should not look at it like how stupid they are, but how human we are. And
Oh,
human is acting like that, the way I was describing towards knowledge and how you apply knowledge and how you don't apply knowledge. And if you want to do a better job, you need to work around those things and try to change them.
yeah. And what I get from that, and first of all, it takes time for changing how things have been done for many years. It's hard. It requires friction,
Right?
energy. That's one thing, uh, and the other is probably when you go to these sort of institutions, it's not just the knowledge. Some people might say it's the connections and it's the network. You can justify that. That's you probably meet interesting people doing interesting things and you learn from them, right? But let's go. We've talked about the education and skills for executives. Now let's go to the. How old are your kids? 18 and 20, right?
Well, I'm 57.
No, no, but your kids.
My kids, they're 22 and 18.
22. Well, probably the 18 is just finishing high school, probably, or starting university. Uh,
No, the 22
and
is finishing at LSE his
I mean
master already.
the 18
22-year-old. The 18 is finishing IB,
is
yes,
finishing AP.
and
Right,
going to
right.
university. Yeah,
Let's say, well, they're right at the end. They're going to start probably their education right now. But think about your grandkids, if you have them.
yeah. I don't have them,
If,
but I
but
hope I
if
don't
you
have them very
when you
soon.
have it, when you have them, if you will, when you think about education, that isn't that what's happening. I mean, it's the same at the corporate level. You go, you learn stuff, and
Yeah.
you leave high school, and then you go to 4 years of university. How relevant do you think those 4 years will be for entering the workforce or developing skills? How relevant that you think those 4 years will still be in the coming years?
Differently, for sure. Relevant in the experiences that you have, because university and going to university, those 4 or 3 years, in some countries it's 3 years, in Europe it's 3 years, in the UK it's also 3 years, and then you have an incorporated master degree with another 1 or 2 years. So it could be up to five. Whatever it is, 3 or 5. It's not just about what you learn. Let's do again the comparison with the early conversation of management versus leadership, and
Yeah,
say that what you learn technically is management, but what you really learn at
too.
university is how you relate to others, how you learn at university how to think, right? In an environment that is much more intense in terms of human relations from it's the first approach to this is not just following the same track. You already decide which way you want to go. It's the first time that you're not doing what all the others are doing, because you already some go to study A, B, or C in a very different way. That usually doesn't happen until maybe later, last year of school. So university is your first attempt to live in the real world. Not a perfect one. You're still not there in being autonomous. You're still learning. Your parents are still probably paying your university. You are in the payroll, but you are learning how to socialize in a more independent way. Okay,
Mhm.
that's a big learning of university. Learning how to think and socialize in a more independent way. Then to your question, yes, I mean, the traditional knowledge has evolved so much. Many years ago, my grandparents were learning the name of the rivers that crossed Portugal and what were the name of all the train stops between two cities and blah blah. That was a content of knowledge that was useful at the time, or I want to think it was useful at the time. There was a logic to it that now does not prevail anymore, because you don't need to learn that. You have access to that information just like that,
Mhm.
whatever you want. So the nature of the learning and the information and the quality evolves as the availability of information and reflections evolve, and it will be different. But that does not mean that technical learning will disappear, because all the opposite. You still need to have the basis to appreciate then what might be
Yeah,
given in a more easier way to you. So back to the other topic, remain or keep up with your critical reasoning abilities.
right. And doing a kind of a summary on the whole thing, and I stopped to think about it for a while, and it's your ability to be curious. What what keeps you relevant? Because asking yourself questions, and how does this work, and why is it like that, and why my wife only asked me about everything, and why is that like that? And I have no idea many times. I almost never have the answer. I don't know why you keep asking me those things. And she goes and find it for
Oh,
the but it's
w-
that.
w- when you were young, you play with fire, but go on.
But that's something I admire about her. She's curious all the time and learn about different things in health and psychology and 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 that gives you the ability to think for yourself. Just being curious, ask yourself questions to yourself, and go find the answer. And that's probably a way to practice that critical thinking, just by being curious about stuff.
Yes, I mean there is even a deeper learning, which is we become less free as we grow up, right? I mean, wanting or not,
Mm,
society rules, even good rules to live in society. At the end, they take away always a bit of your
yeah,
freedom of speech, your freedom of thinking, because as a human being, you learn and you become what you learn, wanting or
yeah,
not, to a certain extent. Yeah, and that's a long process of losing creativity. The way to compensate that is that you have a inquisitive mind, a curious mind, that you look for knowledge and that you remain a critical thinking ability. Then you will somehow oppose the natural process of,
yeah,
just bending to what you become in a society which is by far much more imposing than what you think it is. You just get used to it.
it gets used to it. Manuel, we're running out of time, but
Okay.
once again, I wanted to really appreciate you coming here, being so generous and sharing all these very interesting perspectives
I'm
from
learning.
your experience. So I appreciate it.
As I told you, I'm learning from the questions. You learn from the questions. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to learn a bit more. Thank you,
It
Damian.
it was a pleasure for me, Manuel. Thank you so much.